Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. To all honorable resource person, board of director of and manager of SEAMEO RECFON, all respectable participants, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning. Welcome to SEAMEO RECFON International Webinar with topic smoking and increased risks of stunting among children. I am Molina Rizky Astari and I'm honored to be your master of ceremony for today's event. Okay, honorable guests, smoking and stunting are found to be closely correlated. It is known that 85% of households in Indonesia are households who consume cigarettes, while the prevalence of children with stunting in Indonesia is still in the top ranking globally. This webinar now will talk about the impact of smoking and use of tobacco product and public health. Smoking as risk factor for stunting among under 5 children, and updates on stunting alleviation program in Indonesia, the role of tobacco control program. Before we go to the next agenda, I would like to remind general of rules this webinar. First, participants are expected to enter the YouTube channel on time. Second, the use of headphones is recommended. Next, at the end of the session, participants are expected to fill out the evaluation form, and then the certificate will be given to the participants who completed this evaluation. The link to the evaluation form will be shared at the prior of the end of the session. Next, the certificate will be available 3 weeks after this webinar. And for further information, please visit SEAMEO RECFON website and social media regularly. Last, be sure to subscribe and like SEAMEO RECFON.
SEAMEO TROPMED. We know that SEAMEO TROPMED is our midwife for the SEAMEO RECFON. And the second one is Professor Dr. Muhammad Rizal Martua Damanik, PhD, from National Population and Family Planning Board, BKKBN. Yeah, that it's now the institution who lead the stunting affiliation program Indonesia. Although the other speaker, Dr. Grace Wangge, is our knowledge management and policy support manager, is also will contribute significantly in this session. We know that smoking and stunting are found to be closely correlated. It is known that 80% of households in Indonesia, especially and also in other Southeast Asian countries, are households who consume cigarettes, while the prevalence of children with stunting in Indonesia is still in the top ranking globally. Analysis from the Center for Social Security Studies, PKJS, at the University of Indonesia shows that smoking families in Indonesia have a 5.4 higher chance of having children with stunting because these families shift their food and health portion to purchasing cigarettes. In addition, a cross-sectional study by Astuti et al. In Surakarta, Indonesia shows that cigarette exposure of more than 3 days a day increases the risk of stunting by more than 10 times. However, it is very unfortunate the public are less aware of this fact. This webinar aims to increase the public awareness on this issue, specifically for nutritionists and other related health professionals, that appropriate measures could be done. This webinar will talk about one, the impact of smoking and the use of tobacco product on public health, smoking at risk factor for stunting among under 5 children, and updates on stunting alleviation program in Indonesia, the role of tobacco control program. Again, we extend our most gratefulness for the speaker, Prof. Sandra, Prof. Muhammad Rizal Damanik, and Dr. Grace, and also the moderator, Dr. Hilda Kuzan, for the support in this webinar. I warmly welcome to the registrants, more than hundreds from Indonesia, Philippines, and other Southeast Asia countries and beyond, on which you a great learning experience in this webinar session. We hope that the knowledge and skill you gain from this webinar will further be shared to your colleges and could be implemented in your professional work. I thank the committee of this webinar for their hard work. I can see Dr. Levina here, Aline, Renza, and also KMP unit, including Tohir, the biggest one, I think, in SEAMEO RECFON. Well, I thank again to the Union Bloomberg for providing support for this webinar. I wish you all a very successful session. Billahi taufiq wal hidayah. And please, if there is anything in confidence, forgive us. And Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Back to you, Aline. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Muhtar, for the opening remarks. All honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, now we are entering the core session of today's webinar. I would like to introduce Dr. Hilda Kuzan from SEAMEO RECFON as our moderator today. Dr. Hilda Khusun is senior researcher in SEAMEO RECFON. She completed her doctor from University of Queensland, then continued her postgraduate. Currently, she is leading the team to conduct the Indonesian Food Barometer study, and aside from scientific publication, she also authored several teaching modules for use at the university's degree program. Ladies and gentlemen, now please welcome Dr. Hilda Khusun. Dr. Hilda, the screen is yours.
It's still mute.
Sorry, thank you. Okay, thank you Aline for the nice introduction. Good morning everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. We are very glad that this morning we have already with us several distinguished speakers to discuss a very important topics. Yeah, we have known that stunting reduction has been set as a priority program in Indonesia, as well as in several other countries, owing to the SDGs targets. Yeah, but also to the established evidence about the consequences of stunting on later life diseases and health burden and workforce productivity. And we also has been known that many factors has been associated or has been developed as the risk factors for stunting, including factors at the immediate level like dietary intake and infections, as well as factors at the intermediate and basic socio-demographic, as well as political economy of the country. Among others, among the many factors, we understand that smoking and stunting were found to be closely correlated, as has been mentioned by Professor Muhtaruddin Mansur, that families with smokers have a much higher risk of having stunted children. With many different mechanisms, of course, not only biological mechanism, but also the social mechanism plays a role in that association. And we also know that the families or households who consume cigarettes were exaggerated in Indonesia. Yeah, Prof. Mansur has mentioned that around 80% of the household were actually cigarette consumers. So today's webinar is intended to shed more lights on these issues, the latest issues related to smoking as one of the important risk factors of stunting among under 5 children. We have 3 distinguished speakers in this webinar. The first one is Professor Dr. Maria Sandra Tempongko from SEAMEO TROPMED, Bangkok, Thailand, who already here with us. Thank you, Prof. Sandra. And then also Dr. Grace Wangge from SEAMEO RECFON, as well as Professor Rizal Damanik, PhD, who will join us a bit later. He is still having an agenda this morning, but he will join shortly. Yeah, from the National Population and Family Planning Board, or we know it in Indonesia as BKKBN, Badan Koordinasi Keluarga Berencana Nasional. We will start the session. We will invite the first speaker, Dr. Maria Sandra Tempongko. Dr. Tempongko is currently Deputy Director, Deputy Coordinator for Network Office of SEAMEO Secretariat, while also holding a position as visiting professor of the College of Public Health, University of the Philippines. Dr. Tempongko obtained her master and doctoral degree in public health from the College of Public Health, University of the Philippines, Manila. And Dr. Tempongko has a vast experience on behavior change and communication, as she has been the chairperson for Department of Health Promotion. She had been the chairperson for Department of Health Promotion, as well as director of the WHO Collaborating Center for Health Promotion and Education at the University of the Philippines. Currently, she is also team leader for several initiatives of SEAMEO Secretariat, majority on enhancing education and communication at various levels. Among others, she is currently the coordinator of the psychosocial and mental health in the school settings. Dr. Tempongko will give her talk today on the impact of smoking and use of tobacco product on public health. Dr. Tempongko, without further ado, I will give the screen to you, and your time is 45 minutes. Dr. Tempongko, the time is yours.
Okay. Thank you very much, Helda. Good morning, everyone. Pak Mukhtar, colleagues in RECFON, our other speakers, ladies and gentlemen. It's really a pleasure to share with you what this session today. And also, I'd like to thank RECFON for inviting SEAMEO TROPMED Network. Just a little bit of correction, I'm not from SEAMEO Secretariat. I'm with SEAMEO TROPMED Network office in Bangkok.
Sorry, Prof. Sandra, it's the network, so SEAMEO TROPMED Network.
No problem. The concept of public health is quite broad, but I tried to cover the different aspects that are related to tobacco use for this morning session. So, okay, let me just have some clarification about terms so that as we go through the discussion, we're all at the same page. No? When we talk about tobacco use, it is generally defined as the use of any type of tobacco, whether the smoked tobacco or the smokeless tobacco. Now, when we talk about smoked tobacco products, this is any product that is made or derived from tobacco through a combustion process. Examples of smoked tobacco products are cigarettes, cigars, shisha, water pipes, kettles, and BDs. Now, when we talk about smokeless tobacco, these are any product that consists of cut, ground, powdered, or leaf tobacco that is intended to be placed in the oral or nasal cavity. We have like the snoof, the chewing tobacco, which is commonly used, especially by older or senior citizens. No? But we also have now some novel and emerging nicotine products, like, for example, the ENDS, or what we call the electronic nicotine delivery system. Commonly, it's called the e-cigarettes. No? We've heard about the e-cigarettes. This is actually, it's using an e-liquid, which is a nicotine-containing solution that is heated together with with propylene glycol and the vegetable glycerin to generate an aerosol that is actually inhaled by the user. Okay? So that's the e-cigarette. Another emerging product is what we call the heated tobacco products. Tobacco is heated only, not burned, unlike the smoked. Tobacco is burned. No? When heated, an aerosol is also produced. This product also contains nicotine and other toxic substances that is actually inhaled by the user. And this is in the form of specially designed cigarettes, like what we call the heat sticks, the neo sticks, or pods or plugs. So there's a lot of products in the market now that all fall under when we talk about tobacco use. What is the difference between the e-cigarette and the heated tobacco? The e-cigarette do not use tobacco, but nicotine is also contained. No? So, but both are smokeless. So both do not produce a smoke nor ash. Okay. And then we have what we call, and you will be reading this in a lot of articles, you will hear it in a lot of sessions, we call the second-hand smoke. The second-hand smoke is actually a combination of the mainstream smoke. This is the smoke exhaled by the smoker, and what we call the side stream, or the smoke emitted from the burning end of the cigarette or other smoked tobacco products. No? So exposure to the secondhand smoke is actually called involuntary smoking, or what we call the passive smoking, because the one who is exposed to the secondhand smoke is not really the one who is smoking. So it's called involuntary or passive smoking. Then recently, they were able to, studies have shown that is also what we call the third-hand smoke, which is really the residual of the tobacco smoke that settles into the environment and stays there for days, weeks, and even months after a cigarette has been extinguished. If you have this experience when you enter a hotel room that is smoking room, even though nobody is smoking, you can still smell the tobacco smoke. And that is because of the third-hand smoke that is present. Now, let's look at the prevalence of tobacco use. In the WHO 2019 report, this is the global report on tobacco use, 1.4 billion tobacco users involving age 15 and above. 1.0 billion are smokers, while a certain proportion are using smokeless tobacco. And the rest are actually using combination of both. If you look at the graph, this is a comparison between the prevalence in 2007 and 2017. There's actually a slight reduction, but this is still a substantial and a very significant proportion of the global population. So it is still causing a lot of harm. Now let's look at the prevalence of tobacco use in our countries, in Asia. And I got this. This is the 2018 source data of the global WHO Global Health Observatory. You would see the prevalence between male and female. The highest is actually in Myanmar, as far as both sexes is concerned, followed by Indonesia and Timor-Leste. No? But even the lowest, I think, is Singapore, but still 15% of the population is still of age 15 and above, is still very significant. Now let's look at children. Children are now called replacement customers. An estimated 24 million children aged 13 and 15 around the world smoke, and 13 million use smokeless tobacco. This is very worrisome because the tobacco company are actually targeting children now in all their campaigns, because the old generation smokers are dying. So they need to have a new generation of users to maintain their business. So we have to be very careful here, and we have to be very vigilant. But their campaign is actually very effective, because they start with flavored products, and which is very enticing to the youth. No? So this is very important in terms of development of program in public health and for prevention of smoking. Now let's look at the prevalence of adolescents tobacco use. This is the 13 to 15. In most of the countries, they use 13 to 15, but except for Brunei and Malaysia, the cohort is 13 to 17. Indonesia has done the latest, Indonesia and Timor-Leste, this is the latest data from Indonesia, 2019 data. The rest are from the Global Health Observatory. Again, you have Timor-Leste is the highest, followed by Malaysia. At least Indonesia here is only about 19% of the age 13 to 15. What about the prevalence of cigarette smoking among adolescents? Again, this data comes from different year of the survey. But again, the age group involved is mostly 13 to 15, except for Brunei and for Malaysia. Again, we have Timor-Leste as the highest, that has the highest prevalence of cigarette smoking among adolescents. That's the 13 to 15 cohort. What about the use of the prevalence of smokeless tobacco use among this age group? We don't have Singapore data, but again, if you look at this, again, Timor-Leste is the one that is leading, followed by Malaysia and Myanmar. So all of this tobacco use are actually present among adolescents in our member countries. Now, in terms of the harmful chemicals that are present in all of these types of tobacco products, tobacco leaves contains the nicotine, which is that addictive product that makes smokers long and crave for cigarettes or other tobacco products. No? The average cigarette contains about 10 to 12 milligrams, but of course, in the smoking process, you don't really absorb everything. But the smoker is able to inhale 1.1 to 1.8 milligram of nicotine by the end of each cigarette. So if you have so you multiply that by 20 sticks of cigarette, and you are actually inhaling a substantial amount of nicotine. If you look at the comparative amount of nicotine, the pipe tobacco would have the highest amount of nicotine. No? Of course, the hookah would have per puff is also big if you have several puffs. Okay. What about tobacco smoke? Okay. The tobacco smoke is it is known and established that more than 7,000 chemicals are actually present in tobacco smoke. That's why this secondhand smoke is really very important. And out of these 7,000 chemicals, 250 are known to be harmful to man, and at least 69 can actually cause cancer or are termed carcinogenic. Sorry. What are the health impacts on the individual? No? Cigarette smoking really harms nearly every organ of the body, which causes disease and reduces the health of smokers in general. You have the different types of cancers, and you have chronic diseases as well. And it's affecting both male and female. Sorry. Okay, tobacco use causes a lot of cancer, as I mentioned earlier, in all the parts of the body. Sorry. If you look at it, 1 in 8 cancer cases are actually caused by smoking. So this is a global data, and 1 in 5 cancer deaths are also caused or contributed immensely by smoking. As I mentioned earlier, smoking can cause 60 types of cancer, but these lung cancer cases can actually be avoided 90% if we eliminate tobacco use. What about smoking and women? No? Smoking is the leading preventable cause of heart attack in women. Women who smoke are more than twice as likely as non-smokers to have a heart attack. And among women with breast cancer, those who were current smokers died from breast cancer at twice the rate than those who never smoked. There's association between cigarette smoke exposure and the malignancy in human breast cancer cells, and increased risk of cervical cancer has already been documented. No? There is no question about the association between smoking and the cancers present in women. At the same time, smoking tobacco causes premature aging and wrinkling of the skin of women and also men as well. Okay, Tobacco is very important as far as coronary heart disease and cardiovascular disease is concerned. About 1.9 million avoidable deaths from coronary heart disease per year are attributable to tobacco use and exposure to secondhand smoke. An estimated 382,000 people died of CHD, which are attributed to secondhand smoke exposure in 2017. So you see that even if you're non-smoker, but if you are exposed to secondhand smoke, there's also an increased risk of dying of CHD, which this number of deaths of CHDs represents 4.3% of all deaths from CHDs. What about specific cardiovascular diseases? Smokers is 2 to 3 times more likely to have a heart attack. Smoking doubles also the chance of a person suffering a stroke. And smokers are 10 times more likely to develop circulation problems. This is because of the combined effects of the nicotine present in tobacco products, tar, and carbon monoxide that force the cardiovascular system to work harder. Our risk of cardiovascular disease is actually increased in association and directly related to the number of cigarettes that we smoke. So as when we smoke one cigarette, it's 100% increase and so on. So it's directly related to the number of the cigarette smoke. The effect on fetus and pregnant women. A pregnant smoker is at higher risk of miscarriage, of having an ectopic pregnancy, of having premature delivery with an abnormally low birth weight of the fetus, and having the baby born with a cleft lip or cleft palate. A woman who smokes during or after pregnancy increases her infant's risk of death from what we call the sudden infant death syndrome. The effect on the fetus and the baby will be discussed later by Grace. So I'm stopping at this one. So in general, this is the effect of smoking on the fetus and the pregnant women. What about the impact of smoking on the lifespan of the individual? On the average, smokers lose about more than 10 years or a decade than non-smokers. No? For every cigarette that a person smokes, it reduces his lifespan by 11 minutes. So every time you have you finish one cigarette, your lifespan is reduced by 11 minutes. So in a normal average lifespan, you lose about 10 years or a little more than 10 years. The impact on the mortality rate, the number of deaths in the number of deaths. This is well documented. WHO estimates that there will be more than 8 million tobacco-related deaths a year by 2030, which is actually amounting to 10% of the global annual deaths worldwide. Tobacco use is the leading global cause of preventable health. We can actually prevent this number of deaths if people quit smoking. It is estimated that one person dies every 4.5 seconds from a tobacco related. In the 20th century, there were 100 million tobacco deaths. If the trend continues as far as smoking, there will be 1 billion tobacco deaths this century. Now let's discuss a little bit more about the secondhand smoke, because this affects not only the smokers but also the non-smokers. The secondhand smoke has more than 50 carcinogens. There also are other chemicals that are found in the secondhand smoke. It contains about 4,000 potentially harmful chemicals and toxins. It is very much implicated in lung cancer, heart diseases, and other illnesses of non-smokers. And it is estimated that 50 million pregnant women and 700 million children are exposed to secondhand smoke on a daily basis, which is really very sad and very tragic. And that approximately 31% of deaths attributable to secondhand smoke involve children. So this is premature death of children because of the exposure to secondhand smoke. The evidence between the relationship between secondhand smoke and health effects in adults, coronary disease, the stroke, dementia, breast cancer, chronic respiratory illnesses, this is already very much supported by a lot of studies. Also, the secondhand smoke health effects in infants and children. Evidence has been shown to show the correlation. No? A lot of children exposed to secondhand smoke and is causing a lot of health problems in children. The sudden death, low birth weight, pulmonary and cardiovascular development risk, increased incidence and severity of asthma, susceptibility to respiratory infection, otitis media, and mood changes and depression, and lifelong obesity, which is, I think, very important as far as RECFON is concerned. No? And this, even when you breathe only small amounts of secondhand smoke, this is still very dangerous for children. Now, because this is the time of COVID, so I put in one slide related to tobacco use and COVID. No? So systematic review meta-analysis have shown that smoking and the risk of negative outcomes. No? Smoking, current or former smokers significantly increases the risk of COVID-19 severity and death. No? Because if you're a smoker, your lungs are already affected or damaged by tobacco. And tobacco affects your immune system. But COVID-19 also affects the lungs. So the effect of coronavirus can be worse for people who are using tobacco. But what is the sad thing is that they were able to establish that 40% of smokers increase use of tobacco and nicotine products during the COVID-19 lockdown, which again could aggravate or exacerbate the health effects of tobacco use in the population. So I think we need to consider this when we develop our programs for COVID-19. Touch on the tobacco use as well. As I said, public health as very broad, and it definitely also involves environmental health. Let's look at the effect of tobacco use on environment. During the agriculture phase, the planting and the farming of tobacco, it causes a lot of negative effects. It can cause deforestation, which can cause floods, pollution of the water system, and other effects of deforestation. It uses, tobacco farming, tobacco agriculture use a lot of chemicals, the pesticides, the fertilizers, which again has negative effect. No? And it was found out that tobacco crops actually deplete the soil nutrients. And the diversion of land use, because tobacco is a cash crop, and instead of using the land for food security, it is diverted to tobacco agriculture. So the diversion of land use is causing not only health, but as well as contributing to poverty as well. During the manufacturing phase, the global tobacco manufacturing produces a lot of solid waste. Solid waste, non-recyclable nicotine containing the waste, and chemical waste as well, which is polluting the environment. WHO has an important document on tobacco and its environmental impact. It gives an overview, but it has a lot of information on this. I recommend this document very highly. Other tobacco toxic products are also used in the manufacturing, and that goes into the waste, the liquid waste, of the manufacturing that pollutes also our water. And of course, the industrial emissions in the manufacturing of the cigarette and other tobacco products. So it's polluting the environment. And during the consumption, again, there's a lot of tobacco product waste that is generated. The cigarette butts are the most commonly discarded waste with non-biodegradable cellulose acetate filter. If you look at along the seashores, and if you look at all the collection of garbage, you will find significant amount of tobacco product waste in there. So the weight attributed to tobacco non-biodegradable waste annually is about 175,000 tons, and that's quite a lot. Even the e-cigarettes contains the batteries, which requires special disposal and the chemicals that are used in the production of that e-liquid, no? And also the packaging, both from the smoked tobacco product and the smokeless tobacco are non-biodegradable. So all of this tobacco product waste contributes to the pollution in the environment. What are the possible pathways of human risk attributed to tobacco waste products? Because of the emission, it pollutes the air, and which also goes down the cycle of the rain and pollutes the environment. It can go into our food chain, and definitely it has a direct effect when children plays in the environment. So there are different pathways or human health risk due to tobacco product waste. Now, again, public health has to cover the economy. No? The impact on the economy of tobacco use, it is actually twofold. One is the cost of tobacco use itself, which again, under this one, you have two types of cost of tobacco use. You have the direct cost, which is the cost of illnesses due to smoking, the healthcare expenditure, because the health sector is actually overwhelmed. There's so much demand for health services for this chronic and cancer diseases. And the direct cost can also include the resources used by other agencies and charitable organizations. The indirect costs to society and the non-smoking public is the cost of the second-hand smoke, even if you're not a smoker. The cost to employers in the form of loss of productivity and absenteeism of smokers, because studies have shown that smokers have a higher level of absenteeism. So there's loss of productivity owing to smoking-related illnesses. And of course, we have seen smoking-induced fires, sickness, invalidity, benefits, and all the environmental costs are all negative externalities of smoking to society. So that's the cost due to tobacco use itself. On the other hand, there's also the cost of reducing its prevalence. Countries are undertaking a lot of measures to reduce the prevalence of smoking. And that actually costs a lot in terms of campaigns, in terms of resources, in terms of expertise, in terms of materials. So that's the other cost of the impact on the economy. Studies have shown that smoking is estimated to cause about 1.4 trillion in economic damages every year. So in summary, I'm ahead. Summary, we can say tobacco use causes diseases. For all population, you have actually cancers, chronic diseases, infectious diseases as well. It's not just the non-communicable diseases that are related to tobacco. The recent studies have shown that the tuberculosis death is enhanced or exacerbated by the use of tobacco. And of course, we have seen the effect of tobacco on COVID-19. It decreased, which is a communicable diseases. which actually increases the severity and the death rate of COVID-19. Definitely, it contributes to premature deaths, not only because of the direct tobacco use, but also because of the second-hand smoke, exposure to second-hand smoke. It results to the high cost of healthcare. Our health systems are actually burdened by the cost of treating these chronic long-term diseases, which can be attributable to smoking. It definitely affects the environment, which in a way would also have an effect on the health of the individual, and definitely it affects the economy. The money that should be used for food security, like the land, that can be used for other developmental activities are actually directed and used for reducing the prevalence and also treating the diseases. So we should, as everybody, should say no to tobacco. This is, I think, one of the messages that I'd like really to say, that please let us all enhance our advocacy in saying no to tobacco. So I think that's it for now, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
Still mute, Bu Helda.
Thank you, Pak. I always forget to unmute. Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Sandra, for the very comprehensive overview of the impact of tobacco use on the public health. Allow me to have a brief summary of what Dr. Sandra has mentioned. Dr. Sandra has explained about the different types of tobacco use and tobacco product, from the traditional one, in which tobacco is burned, to the most current style of tobacco consumption, where tobacco is not burned but heated. Yeah, and then also Dr. Sandra also explained about the different degrees of smokers. The first-hand smokers, the smoker themselves, the second-hand smokers, where people inhale the smoke from the first-hand smokers, and there is even the third-hand smokers, where people who were exposed to residual tobacco contaminant in the environment. And then Dr. Sandra continue on explaining the prevalence of tobacco users. Globally, the tobacco user is higher in high-income countries. Nonetheless, in ASEAN countries, Myanmar, Indonesia, Laos, PDR, and Timor-Leste has the highest prevalence, with male at a much higher rate as smokers. And the prevalence is also high among adolescents and even among children. And then the talk is also mentioned about the impact of tobacco use on health, where it has been explained that smoking has been associated with many types of cancer, cardiovascular diseases, and has impacted on different parts of the body, and also impacted the fetus among pregnant women. And it is associated with increased risk of mortality, whereas Dr. Sandra mentioned 1 person dies every 4.5 seconds due to tobacco-related cause. And then the impact is not only among the first-hand smoker, but also the second-hand smokers, where they are exposed to 50 carcinogens and 4,000 toxic chemical substances. And then also 31% of child death is attributed to second-hand smokers. And then also Dr. Sandra has mentioned about tobacco smoking and COVID, where tobacco smoking has increased the risk of severity and death due to COVID. And then also the impact on environmental health, where tobacco use increase deforestation, and then increase waste production, pollution, industrial emission, and non-biodegradable risk, health risk. And then also there is an explanation on the impact on the economy, including the direct costs on the illness and healthcare expenditure, and indirect costs due to the cost of secondhand smoker, cause of productivity and cause of low productivity due to smoking-related diseases, as well as cause of reducing the prevalence. Also, allow me to read the summary, to give the summary in Indonesian. It's good that Dr. Sandra has stopped earlier so that we can give the summary in Indonesian. Bapak Ibu sekalian, peserta webinar kali ini, Dr. Sandra Tempongko telah menjelaskan kepada kita secara komprehensif tentang impact dari penggunaan tembakau terhadap kesehatan masyarakat. Dijelaskan bahwa penggunaan tembakau itu ada berbagai tipe, mulai dari yang sangat tradisional seperti merokok biasa sampai ke penggunaan berbagai tipe tembakau. Cara mengkonsumsi tembakau saat ini sudah berbagai, termasuk e-cigarette itu. Ya. Kemudian Dr. Sandra telah menjelaskan bahwa smokers atau perokok itu ada beberapa level, ada the first hand smokers, perokoknya sendiri, kemudian ada second hand smokers, orang yang menghirup asap rokok dari first hand smoker, bahkan ada third hand smoker, yaitu orang-orang yang terekspos terhadap residu tembakau. Dr. Sandra juga menjelaskan bahwa prevalensi perokok itu sangat tinggi di negara ASEAN, Indonesia, Myanmar, dan Laut PDR, serta Timor Leste itu prevalensinya lebih dari 30%, bahkan di kalangan pria, prevalensinya itu sampai 70% pria, hampir semuanya merokok. Kemudian dijelaskan pula berbagai impact dari merokok terhadap kesehatan. Merokok berasosiasi dengan 50 different types of cancer, ada 50 jenis kanker, kemudian penyakit jantung, kemudian juga berpengaruh terhadap janin dalam kandungan wanita, dan juga meningkatkan resiko kematian. Dijelaskan bahwa statistik menunjukkan 1 orang meninggal setiap 4,5 detik akibat dari hal-hal yang berhubungan dengan konsumsi rokok. Dan efek ini tidak hanya pada first hand smoker, pada para perokoknya, tapi juga pada second hand smokersnya. Juga dijelaskan bahwa perokok itu memiliki increased risk, resiko lebih meningkat resikonya terhadap perburukan dan angka kematian karena COVID-19. Juga dijelaskan bahwa konsumsi rokok sangat berpengaruh terhadap kesehatan lingkungan, termasuk perusakan hutan, kemudian polusi, emisi industri, dan juga produksi solid waste, produksi sampah dari akibat penggunaan rokok. Jadi bahkan puntung rokoknya itu setiap tahun itu 175.000 ton sampah puntung rokok akibat konsumsi rokok. Jadi besar sekali ya, 175.000 ton itu banyak sekali. Kemudian juga dijelaskan bahwa merokok itu mempunyai efek terhadap ekonomi, baik itu biaya penggunaan tembakaunya, juga biaya untuk menurunkan prevalensinya. Dan di akhir Dr. Sandra mengajak kita semua untuk katakan tidak pada merokok. Demikian summary atau rangkuman dari apa yang telah disampaikan Dr. Sandra Tempongko. Bapak Ibu sekalian yang memiliki pertanyaan, silahkan dituliskan pertanyaannya di link yang sudah diberikan di channel YouTube. Nanti pertanyaannya akan dipilih oleh komite dan akan di-show. Selanjutnya kita akan menuju ke pembicara kedua. We will now invite the second speakers, our very own Dr. Grace Wangge. Dr. Wangge is currently Manager of Knowledge Management and Partnership Unit of SEAMEO RECFON. She obtained her PhD in Pharmacoepidemiology from Utrecht University. I hope I pronounce it correctly. And her master degree also in clinical epidemiology from Netherlands Institute of Health Sciences. Dr. Wangge is a medical doctor by training, graduated from Universitas Indonesia. Her research interest is more on translational research and action research to bridge the knowledge generated from basic sciences to policy recommendation. Currently, Dr. Wangge is the co-principal investigator on action research on implementation of early childhood care and nutrition education as a long-term distance learning module. She is also principal investigator for occupational health policy in the COVID pandemic 19, and then also she is the PI for grants from Bloomberg Union on resolving stunting by raising tobacco tax in Indonesia. Today, Dr. Wangge will highlight on smoking as risk factor for stunting among under 5 children. Without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Grace Wangge to start her presentation. Dr. Wangge, your time is 40 minutes. Hopefully you can finish it within 30 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Bu Helda. I think I can finish before 40 minutes, so you can also give a nice summary in the end in English and also in Indonesian. Thank you so much, dear speakers, dear Prof. Sandra. Thank you for bringing the first presentations because I think you give us a very clear description on the impact of smoking on public health. Now I can just focus on how smoking is actually infecting also the nutritional status for children, especially under 5 children. And of course, in the relation of a specific malnutrition issue, which is stunting. So let me see. Okay. So I think most of you in the audience know what is stunting. It's a very common and notorious term in these last years, because basically it was defined as a condition where children have an impaired growth and development, and it's characterized by the length of the height below the standard. So you can see that for stunting or stunted children, they tend to grow shorter than their peers. And it actually reflects the process of failure to achieve linear growth due to a suboptimal health or nutritional condition. So it's kind of a chronic condition. It's not something that an acute condition, but it happened because of a long-term suboptimal health and nutritional inadequacy. And not only that, stunting also create a long-term effects on the individuals, on the children, and also in the society in the end. Because for the children, when they grow up, they may have an impaired cognitive and physical development. So it's not just because they are short, but they also have the issue of cognitive problem. And that's actually the main reason why stunting is such a disease that we need to alleviate. And of course, because they have a reduced cognitive, they will have a reduced productivity, and they also have a risk of having a degenerative disease faster than their peers. So they have increased risk of diabetes and also hypertension. So if you see among in the Southeast Asia countries, if we talk about malnutrition issues, we can see here that among these countries, there are various combination of malnutrition issues. For example, for a country like Singapore, they tend to only have one single problem, which is anemia. And for a country like Malaysia, Malaysia have actually triple burden malnutrition issues, where they have overweight, anemia, and stunting all together. While countries like Indonesia, Myanmar, Timor-Leste, Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam are still facing the problem of double malnutrition, which is anemia, and stunting. So not all countries have an issue with, in Southeast Asia have an issue with stunting, but still, majority of the countries still have to face and try to alleviate stunting as their main health or nutritional program. So in this region, stunting is still a problem. That's what I want to say. And if we look at the framework of undernutrition, so this framework of undernutrition is often used to explain what is actually the determinants or the causes of stunting. So you see here, the immediate cause of any malnutrition or undernutrition is usually the imbalance between the intake and the output. Which is diseases. So diseases here can be any diseases. It's not just limited to infections. So these frameworks can explain that the direct cause of any malnutrition, including stunting, is the imbalance between when you have an inadequate dietary intake and when you have a chronic disease that actually take up all your protein, your nutrients needs. So you cannot really compensate for that because you have an inadequate dietary intake. And those two causes is actually have an underlying causes, which is household food security, inadequate care and feeding practice, and unhealthy household environment. So you can see from this framework, it's not enough to combat the issue of malnutrition and also stunting just by giving an adequate dietary intake, just by giving additional food. Because actually the underlying causes and also the basic causes is more prominent and need multi-stakeholders collaboration in order to overcome it. Yeah. So that's the framework. That was the framework from UNICEF. The WHO have their own framework, try to explain the stunted growth and development. And this framework is actually giving a more focused picture on how stunting is actually happening and what are the impact of stunted growth and development to the individual and also to the population. So you can see here the WHO categorized the causes into household and family factors, inadequate complementary feeding, breastfeeding, and infection. So these four domain is actually the main determinant factors that were affecting the incidence of stunted growth and development. So you and that four domain is actually built under the context of community and societal factors. So it is really clear from this framework that in order to solve the problem, the issue of stunted growth and development, we have to focus on not just on intake or inadequate complementary feeding or infections, but we also have to look specifically on the proper breastfeeding practice and also household and family factors, which is smoking is actually categorized or included in the terms of home environment under the domain of household and family factors. But you can see here in this framework that was released in 2013, there is no items on smoking, right? So you cannot find here that smoking is somehow affecting the incidence of stunting. Is it really true? So I will now give you some recent evidence related to smoking and how it associated with stunting. So again, when we compare countries among Asian countries in terms of stunting prevalence. This is the data from 2015. You can see here that Thailand is actually have the lowest number of prevalence of stunting, right? It's only like about around 16, 15. And the highest number of prevalence is owned by Laos, PDR, and also Indonesia, number 2. But this is data of 2015. I looked at the Global Nutrition Report yesterday, and I saw that the Laos in 2017 reported the rate of 29% of prevalence of stunting, while Indonesia reported in 2018 the rate of 30.8%. So I don't know whether now the number one highest prevalence stunting is whether it's Laos or Indonesia. I tried to find the recent evidence, but I don't think it's been released yet. So we don't know yet whether actually Indonesia is number one in terms of stunting prevalence among Asian countries. Of course, this data, because it's Asian countries, is not including Timor-Leste. So Timor-Leste is also probably have a issue with stunting, but still, I think based on the latest report, the number is also declining. So I tried to look on the determinants of stunting from the two countries among Asian countries. The one who has the best, the lowest prevalence of stunting, which is Thailand. So based on the recent publication in 2020, it was reported that their prevalence of stunting is actually already reduced below 10%, which is only 8.5%. And it was identified in the study that there are several determinants of stunting, and as you can see here, most of the factors is actually related to households, host factors, and also low maternal factors in terms of low maternal educations. So the strongest determinants of stunting is among in Thailand is actually the low birth weight. So if a baby born with a low birth weight, they will have the 3 times risk to have stunting compared to the one who has a normal weight at birth. So that's, I think, the only clinical significant number in terms of risk factors for stunting in Thailand. So any babies with a low birth weight, they will tend to be stunted later in the first 2 years of their life. So this actually could be an easy, based on this data, could be very targeted focus for government of Thailand, because then, if you just see the data, as a politician, okay, we just tackle the issue of low birth weight, and maybe the number of stunting will further reduce. Except because the other relative risk is actually just slightly above 1, so it's not really giving a significant impact as the cause of stunting. That's what happened in Thailand based on the recent data. How about Indonesia? I choose Indonesia instead of Laos because I'm Indonesian, and based on the numbers, probably Indonesia have the highest prevalence among the Asian countries. So there's a review in 2018 by Bill and et al. Who tried to map what are the determinants of stunting in Indonesia. So in 2018, actually, the rate of stunting in Indonesia is 30.8 based on the Riskesdas, the health survey. And see here, there are a dominant factor of maternal factors, so poor nutrition during preconception, pregnancy, and lactation of the mothers is actually very much influencing the occurrence of stunting. If the mother is also stunted, they are also short. It also a very associative factors with stunting. Adolescent pregnancy still a very big issues in many regions of Indonesia, and it's actually very much associated with stunting, and also the preterm and intrauterine growth retardation among babies. For the child, is the high rate of infection, especially enteric infection, diarrhea, helminth infection, and also respiratory infections, is the factors that actually determine stunting. And as in other countries, inadequate breastfeeding practice still happening, and also inadequate complementary feeding. And for the community societal factors, poverty in employment and livelihoods, and also inadequate access to healthcare is very much affecting the number of stunting in Indonesia. And one of the significant factors is actually urbanizations. Yeah? So the higher rate of urbanization is actually somehow correlated with the high rate of prevalence of stunting in Indonesia. In terms of home environment domain, there's one interesting fact here. So besides the poor care practice, inadequate sanitation and water supply, food insecurity, and also low caregiver education, which is already listed in the WHO framework of context, for Indonesia, there is a spatial factors that were not in the framework, which is smoking. So there are several cross-sectional data from Indonesia, because Bill and et al. Is actually doing a systematic literature review on recent publications that, on Indonesia related to stunting determinants. And one of the factors that is actually quite prominent is about paternal and maternal smoking. So apparently among stunting children in Indonesia, paternal and maternal smoking giving an increased risk of between 1.10 to 1.17 times higher for so if you're a child living and have your both mother and father smokers, you actually have an increased risk of around 10 to 17% higher to be stunted. And it doesn't really make a difference between urban pure, and it's actually a bit there's an evidence that is among urban pure and rural children, this is especially common for paternal smoking. It's actually affecting the rate of stunting. And also secondhand smoker exposure is related to child stunting. But then you can see here the number, the OR, the odds ratio is what, 1.1.1. Although it's significant, the rate is considered not really high. I mean, like if we as I'm an epidemiologist, if I see the rate of 2, I will instantly look, oh, that's a very significant factors related. But you can see here the rate is about 1.1.1, but still it's more than 10% increase. So if you have you are exposed to smoking as a secondhand smoker, as a child, you may get the higher risk of becoming stunting. Yeah, and all this is actually small studies, so maybe that's why it's kind of explained, and small studies, and also only studied in very specific population. So that's might also explain the small number of odds ratio, because it's lack of variability between the subjects. Okay, so when we talk about maternal smoking, I think Prof. Sandra already mentioned about the impact of smoking on pregnant women. So there's a nice summary here on the effect of maternal smoking. What happened if your mother smoked to an individual from their infancy to adolescence. So you see here that the effect of smoking is actually there in every step, in every phase of life of these children whose mother is smoker. You can see before they were born in birth, inside the womb, the children are already exposed to fetal tobacco syndrome. So they have a high risk to have this fetal tobacco syndrome, and their lung growth is also impaired. So a lot of children who was a lot of mother who have the children who has a mother as smokers, usually they were born prematurely, and their lung maturation is not really a cure. So they should need special care in the neonatal ICU, and also they get their immune system is impaired, so they are more prone for infection later. And there's also changes in epigenetics. So there's a changes in their genetical. It's not a genetic DNA, but more on their more on their phenotype. Sorry. So they later when they're already being born, they're more prone to a certain disease. And also during infancy, of course, could be an indirect effect of smoking to the child itself, but could that also be an indirect effect through breastfeeding? So if although the children is not really maybe the father is is a smoker, and the father tried to avoid not smoking in front of the children, but still if the mother who's still breastfeeding is exposed to the smoke, they still have can actually kind of giving the impact of smoking through the breastfeeding. And that happened, the effect of smoking happened throughout the phase of the life. And also even during the school age, there is an effect of less steroid efficacy, meaning that children with asthma, they probably have less effect. So they're not really sensitive to the medication of asthma, which is steroid. So of course, if your child already born from a mother of smoking, you have a problem with the lung issues, then you tend to have an asthmatic disease. And then there's another issue if you still been exposed to smoke, and then you also less you cannot get the best medication because you're not really responded to the gold standard medication. So this is very much an issue of smoking that were caused by maternal smoking. So this is really shows that actually we have to prevent a mother actually become a smoker, yeah? Because impact is goes beyond even the child in their womb, but also maybe the next generation to their grandchild. Okay. There's this large cohort studies in England. This study is actually published in 2012, who's actually giving kind of the description how maternal smoking during pregnancy is impacting the length and the height of the children. So it is shown here that the maternal smoking is actually associated with shorter birth length. So especially among girls, yeah. So if the mother is a smoker, they tend to have shorter babies, especially girls, with the length of minus 1.1, so about 1 centimeters more shorter the child. And not just that, after 10 years, the doctors so after 10 years, when you measure the daughters, they actually more stunted than their peers. So they are 1.1 centimeter shorter than their peers. Based on this follow-up large cohort studies. And not only that, I want to highlight I want to take your attention to this adiposity. So for girls, you can see here, actually there's an increase of adiposity, increase of fat among girls who were born from mothers who were smoking. So the risk of obesity is actually higher after 10 years. We can see, we don't really have the data yet for the long-term follow-up after 10 years, but this is already happening. This already shown that they are shorter, but also they have more fat adiposity. And that's especially among girls, because boys, they only have, after 10 years, they only short about 0.46, so less than half centimeter shorter than their peers. Okay. But they also have an increased adiposities, fat adiposities. Okay, so they have increased risk of obesity later in their life. And there's another study. This is actually a systematic review done by Quail Health et al. And it was published in 2018. So she's doing systematic review and meta-analysis and combining the data from different studies to see how is the impact of maternal smoking on the length at birth. And they managed to pull and see that if the mother used the tobacco, they actually the babies are 0.43 centimeters shorter than compared to the babies that was born from mother who's not smoked. But you can see here, if the mother quit smoking during the pregnancy, so they were smoker, but then they quit smoking during the pregnancy, actually the length is improved. So they tend to have a kind of a normal birth, normal length at birth, right? And they also managed to pull the data. You see here, so if you're not really quitting, but just still smoking, but not often, during the pregnancy, is the same rate. Your baby will have a risk of shorter, 0.46 centimeters shorter. And if you smoke, if the mother smoke more than 10 cigarettes per day, the difference is even higher, 0.51 centimeters shorter, the babies. So you can see here, it is really important during the pregnancy to actually stop smoking in terms of the so you can so the mother can have a normal length baby during birth. Yeah. So maybe half centimeters, maybe you think it's not really significant, but for babies, it's actually really something that quite significant, half centimeters. So, okay. So that's the latest research evidence. So it is really that maternal smoking have an impact of the length of the baby during birth. You can already see the impact during when the baby is being born. And how about the paternal smoker? So this is a study was analyzed of data from 482 children aged 2 to 6 years old in Indonesia. And they are children from low income status household. And you can see here that children who has father who are smoker actually have a risk for malnutrition, not just stunting, but also underweight. You can see here, this is the dark bar. The risk of becoming stunting among children who has a smoker father is 62.2%. It's higher compared to the one who's not whose father is not smoking, which is less than 50%. And there is also for underweight. There's more children who is underweight if the father is smoker, 35.6% compared to the children who doesn't have smoker father, who was actually really under 30%. So you can see here, not just maternal smoking, but also paternal smoking will have impact on the nutritional status of the children. And not just during their birth, maybe you think if they are shorter during birth, they can catch up with the good nutrition. But this is what the data shows for children aged 2 to 6 years old. So if they continue being exposed to smoking, they will have increased risks of becoming stunting. Yeah. How about the secondhand smoking? So I think Prof. Sandra already mentioned about secondhand smoking, also even the third-hand smoking. Yeah. So there are several studies. So although this is small studies, well, I won't say small, but it's more like one country study, one country observational studies that shows that secondhand smoking is indeed associated with lower length and also stunting. So there is systematic review already done by Nadihiro et al. And in the systematic review, it shows there's a study, cohort studies in Iran and Turkey, that shows that secondhand smoking is associated with lower length during birth among children, and also secondhand smoking is kind of a risk factor and it's shown from studies in Bangladesh and also in Indonesia. Yeah, and again the increased risk is above 10%. So they are 1.13 to 1.17 or 1.11 times have a higher risk to become stunting if they were exposed to second hand smokers. Yeah. Although there are also conflicting studies, from other countries, cross-sectional studies that shows that although there's an increased risk, but it's actually not significant. So the data on this is still it's not conclusive. That's what concluded from the literature review. But we can see that most of the studies are only conducted in certain population in one country, and usually just a cross-sectional study. It's not really a cohort study. So I will say that the data is not yet enough, but we are hoping that we can see more data in the future. And interestingly, when I try to compile this evidence, most of the data is actually come from about smoking and stunting, come from low middle income country. Excuse me for a second. Yeah, sometimes I have someone else want to take my place in the presentation. Sorry. But you can see also there's a cross-sectional study was published by Dia et al. In Solo, that it shows that if children are exposed to smoking more than 3 hours per day, their risk to get a stunting is actually increased to more than 10 times. Yeah, this is a study, a small study about 120 children, aged 25 to 29 months, and it is shown that in Surakarta that the exposure of smoking for more than 3 hours per day is actually related to stunting. Okay, now I will bring you to more convincing data. So I think one of the most convincing data that shows the impact of smoking on childhood stunting is shown by by our colleague from PKJS UI, from Pak Teguh and Bu Reni, that shows that how is actually smoking infecting the stunting is through the socio-economic factors. So you can see here, they make this framework that how smoking affecting stunting is actually through the family income. Because the income, the limited income because of the poverty, it will impact their household consumption. And it, in the end, will impact the nutrition because the father, especially the family, sometimes prioritize more on buying cigarettes instead of buying nutritious food, and that will impact the nutritional status of the children. And also it's affecting by the parenting style. Yeah, so how the family is eating frequency, snacking, and their inadequate exclusive breastfeeding practice is affecting also give also impact to the nutrition, and it will add to the impact of changing in the household consumption of nutritious food. So this is why I say this is a very convincing data, because this is a data that analyzed the Indonesian family life survey data, so quite a large data set. And Pak Teguh already shown that children with smoking parents were 5.5% more likely to be stunted than children of non-smoking parents. And also the number of cigarettes consumed per day is somehow negatively correlated with the expenditure of nutritious food. So if the family increase the buying of the cigarettes, they will reduce the number of buying for nutritious food. Yeah, so so it's not like it's not positively correlated, but it's negatively correlated. So the amount of income is, I think, is constant, but then the proportion of nutritious food is becoming less if the family is, anyone in the family is actually a smoker. And this is the recent data actually in 2019 that shows an household expenditure in Indonesia. As you can see here, the consumption of tobacco is actually number 2 in terms of consumed by any family in Indonesia. So the consumption of tobacco is about 10.5%, and is actually higher than the consumption of fish, vegetables, and meat, the nutritious food. So you can see here, even in 2019, so the IVLS data is actually the data from 2014, but still in 2019, the pattern of consumption among Indonesian households is not really changed. Yeah, still tobacco consumption is higher compared to nutritious food. So yeah, so this is actually an issue, and somehow it's more explaining the relationship between smoking and stunting. Yeah. So I just want to highlight a recent literature review done by Rosianti et al., who says that among Southeast Asian country, actually there's one common theme of determinants of stunting, which is an inappropriate of infant and young children feeding practice. And it's somehow related to how the Indonesians actually shifting their household consumption from nutritious food to smoker, to prioritize cigarette instead of nutritious food. So in many studies, I think in other countries' report, smoking is not really mentioned. I think I only saw a lot of some reports actually from Indonesia who says that smoking is indeed one of the factors that correlated with stunting. But in other countries, it was stated, it was shown that inappropriate infant and young care feeding practice is actually related, and I feel it is the same thing, right? So how a family actually feed their infant, and to do that they have to shift all their limited income, is related to how smoking is actually infecting stunting. And you can see here, based on this literature review, one of the other factor is the lack of education of mother that influence the inappropriate IVCF practice. So if we see this new evidence, we can see that somehow one of the solution that we can offer is how we can improve mother education on IVCF, because I think mother play an important role also in household consumption. So I just want to slightly introduce what SEAMEO RECFON already done in terms of promoting the nutrition dense local food based guideline. So there is we already have this creating some of the guidelines of nutrient dense local food, and this why we creating this guidelines is more on the because of also the emphasis of the importance of how we can increase or combating malnutrition by using local foods, because the idea is if we look using a local foods is actually also supporting the sustainability in the region. So instead of using, for example, imported foods to help combating the nutrition. And beside of that, local food have a local tradition and values, and it's supposed to be more affordable because it is available in that area. Yeah. So currently, SEAMEO RECFON, in working with GAIN and also the Ministry of Health, is using the data sources of Ministry of Health 2016 Nutrition Consumption Monitoring Survey, is creating specific nutrient-based, food-based recommendation for 50 stunting priority region in Indonesia. And using the OptiFood, which is an app or a software that was developed also by WHO, we can actually identify the problem nutrients in each of the region, and based on the problem nutrients, we kind of recommended what kind of food that need to be recommended, need to be put in the guideline for each region. So each region will have a specific nutrition problem, but then they will also have a specific nutrient food-based recommendation. So it's not something like a generic recommendation for all region, but SEAMEO RECFON, and together also with our academic partners, we try to create a different food-based recommendation that were based on local food in Indonesia. Yeah. So based on the OptiFood, we found that also the problem nutrients among children in Indonesia are quite different. For younger children, actually iron is more prominent as a problem nutrients compared to the older children. So based on that, we created the guidelines of nutrient-dense local food base, and the concept of local food is not traditional indigenous food, but local food is food that is locally available and often consumed by the community. So this is something that familiar and also available in the region. So it doesn't have to be something that you have to dig from the forest, but it is something that is actually already been commonly eaten. So it's no wonder, for example, in eastern part of Indonesia, there's also probably recommendation of eating tofu, for example, because although it's not really indigenous to that area, but it's already available in that area. So our concept of local food is more like based on availability and familiarity of the food for the children. And by doing that, we hope that the family can be more sustainable and can afford, or even they can arrange their household consumption into and shift it to for buying a more nutritious food that locally available instead of buying cigarette, for example.
Sorry, Dr. Grace, you may.
So the time is up.
Conclude.
Yeah, I just want to conclude. So this is. So stunting is still an issue in many Southeast Asia countries, and although the evidence is varies, maternal and paternal smoking is somehow a determinant factor for stunting, and it goes in influence through childhood growth and health, but also influence the practice, the feeding practice of the children because of inappropriate household consumption. And so it is. I think it's the right time to put tobacco measurement effort as part of the stunting alleviation program in many countries, not just in Indonesia, but maybe also in Southeast Asia. I think that's conclude my presentation. Sorry for any inconvenience during the presentations. I return it to you, Bu Helda. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Grace. It's a very interesting presentation on the relationship of smoking and stunting, as well as other risk factor for stunting as well. So your last slide conclude very well your presentation, which said that stunting is still a very big issue in many Southeast Asian countries. And you also provide evidence on the evidence that maternal and paternal smoking is a determinant factors for stunting through different routes, through the intrauterine growth and child and health, as well as through the economic pathways by influencing the household spending, by influencing the household spending not into the nutritious food. And then also in this line also at the end you mentioned about the education, the importance of improving the infant and young child feeding practices, which is still a very big problem in Indonesia. So let me allow me to have to give a summary in Bahasa Indonesia. Bapak Ibu sekalian, Dr. Grace Wangge telah menjelaskan dengan sangat jelas hubungan antara stunting dengan merokok. Di awal Dr. Grace Wangge menjelaskan bahwa stunting itu adalah kondisi dari kegagalan tumbuh dan perkembangan akibat dari ketidakcukupan asupan atau ketidakcukupan gizi dalam waktu lama, dan juga akibat kondisi kesehatan yang tidak optimal dalam waktu lama. Dan ini memiliki akibat jangka panjang terhadap kondisi fisik maupun kondisi kecerdasan seseorang, yang akan berakibat juga pada nantinya terhadap produktivitas kerja dan juga meningkatkan penyakit tidak menular. Dr. Grace juga menjelaskan bahwa permasalahan stunting di negara Asia Tenggara itu masih tinggi, tetapi sebetulnya sudah ada permasalahan lain yang juga terkait dengan stunting, yang disebut dengan double burden atau triple burden. Selain itu, Dr. Grace menjelaskan berbagai faktor yang berasosiasi dengan stunting. Untuk Indonesia, yang prevalensinya sebesar 30%, sebuah literatur review menunjukkan bahwa yang berperan itu adalah maternal factors, faktor-faktor ibu, misalnya kekurangan gizi selama kehamilan dan penyusui, kemudian juga kehamilan remaja, kemudian juga gagal IUGR, intrauterine growth retardation, selain juga faktor-faktor lain, yaitu faktor kesehatan anak maupun faktor lingkungan. Di antara faktor lingkungan itu adalah di home food environment tadi, Dr. Grace menjelaskan bahwa di antara faktor home food environment itu sebetulnya harusnya ada smoking, tetapi itu belum ada di framework yang baik yang disampaikan oleh UNICEF maupun oleh WHO. Padahal maternal dan paternal smoking itu sudah terbukti, sudah diketahui dari berbagai studi bahwa anak-anak yang ibunya merokok itu mereka lebih stunted, mereka lebih pendek dibandingkan teman sebayanya, dan juga mereka memiliki adiposity, penimbunan lemak yang lebih tinggi ketika mereka pada umur yang lebih tua, sehingga mereka memiliki resiko untuk obesitas yang lebih tinggi, yang akhirnya akan meningkatkan resiko terhadap penyakit tidak menular. Namun studi juga menunjukkan bahwa kalau ibu-ibu hamil itu berhenti merokok selama kehamilan, ternyata panjang anak yang dilahirkan itu cenderung menjadi normal. Oleh karena itu, encouragement untuk berhenti merokok selama kehamilan itu sangat penting. Kemudian second hand smoker juga tadi dibahas bahwa exposure 3 jam saja, exposure setiap hari lebih dari 3 jam itu meningkatkan resiko stunting 10 kali lebih tinggi pada sebuah studi di Jawa Tengah ya kalau saya tidak salah. Kemudian sebuah penelitian atau studi yang lain menggunakan data IFLS menunjukkan bahwa efek merokok terhadap stunting itu juga tidak hanya melalui biological factor tapi melalui faktor ekonomi, di mana merokok itu peningkatan spending untuk membeli tembakau itu menurunkan spending menurunkan pengeluaran pada makanan yang sehat, dan ini dibuktikan juga dengan data BPS tentang household food expenditure tahun 2019 bahwa ternyata spending untuk tembakau itu masih 10% dibandingkan spending atau expenditure atau pengeluaran untuk makanan-makanan yang sehat. Dan ini terkait juga, oleh karena itu tidak heran kalau PMBA, pola makan IOCF, Infant and Young Child Feeding Index di Indonesia itu masih sangat rendah. Jadi pola pemberian makan anak di Indonesia itu masih sangat buruk. Oleh karena itu, Dr. Grace menjelaskan sesuai dengan Global Strategy for Infant and Young Child Feeding itu untuk menekankan pada local food-based complementary feedings yang saat ini juga diinisiasi oleh SEAMEO RECFON untuk untuk membuat local food-based dietary guidelines yang saat ini bekerjasama dengan GAIN sudah mencakup ada di 37 kabupaten kota untuk peningkatan infant and young child feeding. Baik, itu saja yang bisa saya simpulkan untuk presentasi dari Dr. Grace Wangge. Terima kasih banyak Dr. Grace untuk presentasinya yang sangat inspiratif. Kita sampai pada pembicara ketiga. Saya No, I should talk in English again. Sorry. So we have now already with us our last speaker, Professor Rizal Damanik, PhD. Welcome, Pak, in our webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you for making the time for this webinar. Prof. Rizal is currently the Deputy for Training, Research and Development of the National Population and Family Planning Body. I hope I translated correctly. Prof. Rizal Damanik received her undergraduate education from IPB University, the same as myself, in the field of veterinary medicine. He obtained her master and PhD from Faculty of Medicine, Monash University, Australia. Prior to the current position, Professor Damanik has also been in charge as head of postgraduate study program in nutrition and head of postgraduate program in food security at IPB University. I would like also to invite all the participants to please put your question on the link which is provided in the YouTube channel. Please mention the name of the speaker you want to ask the question to. Okay, without further ado, I would like to invite Prof. Damanik to start the presentation. Prof. Damanik, the time is yours. Your time is 40 minutes for presentation.
Just a moment.
Yeah, it's clear, Prof.
Okay.
Yeah, it's clear. The screen is
okay. Thank you, Dr. Helda. First of all, of course, I'd like to thank the committee for inviting me to this webinar. And the topics that was discussed in this webinar are very interesting and important, namely about the stunting and tobacco. As we all aware that the smoking is a behavior that has been practiced for thousands of years. And for Indonesia, which is one of the countries with the largest population in the world, it is certainly one of the largest market shares for cigarette producers. On the other side, there has been a lot of research conducted and reported that smoking is a behavior that has a negative impact on health, including its relation to stunting. And on this occasion, the committee has asked me to deliver about this topic. So the title of my presentation is about the convergence action for stunting, alleviation in Indonesia. Next slide, please. My presentation will consist of 4 main focus. The first is preface, and then stunting in Indonesia, cigarette and stunting, and the last is the conceptual of the convergence on accelerate stunting reduction. Next slide, please. Stunting among children less than 5 years as a global overview. So from this data, we can see that globally, the number of stunting children is 114 million in 2019, where the condition of the East Asia and Pacific, including Indonesia, is in the 3rd position. Even though in Asia Pacific, there was a very significant decrease compared to 1990. But globally, we still contribute the high rate of stunting. This indicates that there are still a lot of things that we need to do in an effort to reduce stunting rates, especially Indonesia. Next slide, please. So this is the framework for stunting child determinants. Several determinants of stunting can be differentiated by several factors. First is an immediate causes or proximal, namely the condition of the mother while pregnant and the condition of the baby at birth. The basic causes or intermediate second, such as lack of nutritional needs of mothers and causing lack production of breast milk, lack of health services, and the need for vaccination or additional supplements for pregnant and breastfeeding mothers, and poor living environment. The next factor, namely basic cause or intermediate first, is government programs such as providing cash for poor families, national policies on nutrition, mothers, babies, and toddlers. The last, the smallest factor is the macro level social, economic, political, and environmental context and factors. Next slide, please. This is about the best practices in stunting reduction. If you look at some lessons learned from countries that have the best experience in stunting reduction program, such as Brazil, Peru, and Bolivia, we can conclude that many factors are needed to produce stunting rates, such as an improvement in the fields of education, health economy, and infrastructure for the poor. In the field of education, the parental awareness of the importance of breastfeeding for newborns is needed. In the health sector, such as fulfilling nutritional intake for babies and pregnant women, from economic factors such as cash providing for the poor so that they can buy nutritious food, as well as the development of infrastructure for the poor, such as care, education, and the provision of clean water facilities. Next slide, please. This is about the show us about the stunting in Indonesia. Next slide. So Indonesia is the 5th rank of the world. So according to UNICEF and the World Bank in 2016, Indonesia was ranked 5th in the world in stunting. Approximately 37% of children under 5 in Indonesia are shorter than other children of their age, where 1 in 3 toddlers in Indonesia has stunted growth. The impact of this stunting is the emergence of other health problems in children, even causing deaths. Next slide. What is the challenges and problems in stunting in Indonesia? Some of the problems that exist in Indonesia that can cause stunting in children include the high number of young pregnant women who suffer from anemia, babies born with low weight and lay, babies born prematurely, women marry at young age, about around 10 to 19 years, and pregnancy less than 2 years or 24 months apart. Next slide, please. So in the 2015-2019 RPGMN National Plan Development Period, the decline in stunting was at an average of 0.3%. Whereas in the 2020 to 2024 long-term national plan development program, the reduction target is 2.5%, which means zero additional stunting. This is not easy, but to achieve this target, an accelerated reduction in stunting is required. Next slide, please. So this is show us about distribution of stunting cases in Indonesia in 2019. Convergence trials to strengthen the field. Lines are being carried out to accelerate stunting alleviation in Southwest Sumba district, in the North Nusa Tenggara Timur province, by the coordinating Ministry of Human Development and Culture with the BKKBN through pre-marriage, pregnancy, and periodic approach. Okay, now try to connect about the cigarette and the stunting. Next slide, please. Okay, and next slide. This is a research center for social studies, security studies of the University of Indonesia. So at least there are two research results that I would like to convey on this opportunity, where there is a relationship between stunting and smoking habits in Indonesia. The first is research from the Research Center for Social Security Studies, University of Indonesia in 2018. The research shown that children who live with non-smoking parents grow 1.5 kilos heavier and 0.37 centimeters taller than chronic smoking parents. The probability of children who have chronic smoking parents is higher, 5.5% stunting, rather than children of non-smoking parents. This is the latest research that we have in 2018. Next slide, please. The research conducted of Minister of Health. So in the book Health and Economic Costs of Tobacco in Indonesia, written by Nuni Kusumawardani and her team, researcher from the Health Research and Development Agency of Ministry of Health in 2017. In this book, it is known that among middle to lower economic community, cigarettes rank at the third after rice and foodstuff. So can we imagine the cigarettes is ranked at third after rice and foodstuff? So this is a very important stuff actually for people here. So this is unfortunate because it indicates that the fulfillment of children's nutrition and education has not become a priority compared to cigarettes. Next slide. This is about the concept of convergence to accelerate stunting alleviation in Indonesia. Next slide. About the convergence. BKKBN received a mandate from the President of the Republic of Indonesia as chairman of the acceleration of stunting reduction in Indonesia. In carrying out these tasks, BKKBN reinforces the use of networks with the principle of convergence. sustainable utilizing networks, and based on collectivity principles to gain mutual understanding, support, and cooperation or mutual collaboration. Next slide, please. So, about the platform of the Convergence for Acceleration, we have several convergence platforms for acceleration stunting reduction. This platform certainly noticed to the current program reorientation, namely target degradation from 0.3 to 2.5%. And the pandemic impact, decreasing of public purchasing power and limitation of fiscal government capacity. Remaining time is 3.5 years. First, through client-centered approach type 1, which requires integrated and sustainable services, which is focused on preventive efforts and outreach, reach families that have potential to give birth to stunting children through family life planning, and also followed by the integrated of monitoring and evaluation. Next slide, please. And the second, client-centered approach type 2, is every level of government from the central to the lowest level has a duty and role to play in reducing stunting. Each level of government remains principled on sustainable utilizing networks and based on collectivity principles to gain mutual understanding, support, and cooperation or mutual collaboration. Next slide. And the third, client-centered approach type 3, with strengthening public services by strengthening operational strategies and strengthening governments by strengthening government administrative strategies. And this strategy is supported by regulations and multi-sector involvement, the implementation of programs that do not overlap to other. Next, please. And the fourth is client-centered approach type 4. Multi-sector level model, which is the multi-level penetration model focused on cross-sector coordination patterns by taking into account the existing government system. Next slide. The fifth, client-centered approach 5, ecology model, which focus on BKKBN program that prioritizes direct interaction with the community, such as group activities, surveys, as well as through family planning and reproductive health campaigns in both print and electronic media. Slide. 6, multi-level mutual cooperation with multi-sector to accelerate stunting reduction. This platform requires good coordination between all levels of BKKBN employees, from central to regional, to all government and private sectors related to effort on reducing stunting. Okay. In the next slides, this is pictures. So one of family with stunting. If I'm not mistaken, the location is in the North Nusa Tenggara Timur, Nusa Tenggara Timur province. You can also see the next slide, please. Yeah. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah. Next slide. And this is about the families with toddler stunting. Mother 20 years old, husband 29, and then number of children, 1 children, we can see here. There is in Nusa Tenggara Timur, does not have, the houses doesn't have a latrine there. And this is the food, the consumed by the people there is about the cassava with salt, and then flavoring, seasoning, and chilies. So this is the things. And the next slide is also about the livable home, and this is the bedroom. And then top on the roof, the situation is just like this, and then also the house, the lower, and that's all for my presentation. Thank you, Dr. Helda.
Thank you so much, Dr. Prof. Damanik, for the presentation. Prof. Damanik has explained to us something on started with the global reduction of stunting, which is already, sorry. Okay, I already unmute myself. There is a trend of global reduction of stunting, as explained by Prof. Damanik. But Indonesia, prior to 2019, it is explained that the stunting reduction is just 0.3% stunting reduction prior to 2019. But the target from 2020 to 2024, the target is 2.5% per year, which is a big daunting task for the government. Prof. Damanik also mentioned about the framework of stunting determinants, which is also echoing what has been explained by Dr. Grace Wangge, that stunting is a multifactorial situation. And he also explained that a lot of programs in different countries has been employed and shown to make an impact. And it covers different levels of programs, from nutritious food provision to women education to also environmental sanitation. And it has also been explained about the challenges and problems of stunting in Indonesia, where the problems is, and we have huge anemia problems, huge low birth weight and length problems in here, and then also premature birth is also still a problem, and adolescent pregnancy is still a problem, and also birth spacing less than 24 months is still a problem in our country, which all of them have an influence on stunting. And there is a study conducted by BKKBN, a case study in Southwest Nusa Tenggara to alleviate stunting with approach premarital and then during pregnancy and also after pregnancy among the women. And on the convergency of stunting, it has been explained that BKKBN it has now a mandate as chairman of Stunting Reduction Acceleration in Indonesia, where with the convergence principles covering sustainability, utilizing available networks based on collectivity principles, and to gain mutual understanding, support, and cooperation among the stakeholders. And Dr. Prof. Damanik also explained about the several convergence platform. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Prof. I try to follow that the several convergence platform consists of client-centered approach, different client-centered approach. The first one is client-centered approach focus on integrated and sustainable services, which focus on family needing the services through the preventive and outreach program, and combined with integrated monitoring and evaluation. That was the first client-centered approach. The second client-centered approach is a mutual cooperation at different level. The third center client approach is strengthening public administration strategies, which is supported public administration strategies and governance supported by regulation. The fourth client-centered approach is a multi-level penetration using existing government forms. And then the fifth client-centered approach is looking it in from an ecology model where different stakeholders has to be involved in that. I think that what I can get from the presentation from Prof. Damanik. I hope if there is question, there will be more chance to explain about this convergent platform, which is very interesting. So allow me to give a summary in Indonesian, Prof. Bapak Ibu sekalian, Profesor Damanik telah menjelaskan kepada kita tentang program pemerintah untuk penurunan stunting, di mana sebelum tahun 2019 penurunan stunting di Indonesia itu hanya 0,3% per tahun pencapaiannya, dan pada tahun 2020 sampai 2024 ditargetkan yang bertanggung jawab terhadap penurunan stunting itu ditargetkan untuk menurunkan stunting 2,5% per tahun. Jadi peningkatan dari 0,3% menjadi 2,5% per tahun. Ini merupakan tugas yang sangat besar. Sementara tantangannya juga masih sangat besar di Indonesia. Dijelaskan bahwa tantangannya itu termasuk bahwa masalah anemia masih sangat tinggi, masalah BBLR, berat bayi lahir rendah itu juga sangat tinggi, prematurity, kemudian kehamilan remaja itu cukup tinggi, dan juga penjarakan kehamilan yang masih bermasalah di Indonesia. Lalu dijelaskan bahwa BKKBN sedang melakukan studi untuk mengatasi stunting secara terintegrasi mulai dari sebelum pernikahan, pada saat kehamilan, hingga setelah kehamilan. Support diberikan sebelum pernikahan, pada saat kehamilan, hingga setelah kehamilan. Kemudian untuk program konvergensi stunting sendiri, BKKBN saat ini adalah sebagai chairman atau chairman itu sebagai ketua pelaksana untuk program penanggulangan stunting di Indonesia, sebagai leadersnya, di mana konvergensi BKKBN menggunakan konvergensi principles yang meliputi keberlanjutan, penggunaan network yang sudah ada, kemudian berdasarkan prinsip kolektivitas dan mutual understanding, itu saling pengertian bersama, dan mutual collaboration, kerjasama antar semua stakeholders. Di dalam konvergensi platform ini, Prof. Damanik menjelaskan ada beberapa tipe konvergensi platform. Yang pertama adalah yang disebut dengan client-centered approach. Client-centered approach yang pertama itu berfokus kepada pelayanan yang terintegrasi dan memiliki keberlanjutan, yang difokuskan pada keluarga-keluarga yang memerlukan bantuan melalui outreach, melalui preventif dan outreach program yang dikombinasikan dengan monitoring dan evaluasi yang terintegrasi. Kemudian client-centered approach yang kedua itu adalah mutual cooperation pada berbagai level. Client-centered approach yang ketiga itu penguatan administrasi publik dan governance yang disupport oleh peraturan pemerintah. Kemudian client-centered approach yang keempat itu adalah penetrasi pada berbagai level menggunakan perangkat pemerintahan yang sudah ada. Jadi tidak membuat perangkat pemerintahan yang baru. Kemudian client-centered approach yang kelima itu adalah penggunaan ecology model di mana berbagai stakeholder akan harus bekerja sama untuk convergence platform ini. Mungkin nanti Prof. Damanik akan bisa menjelaskan lebih lanjut pada session tanya jawab. Demikian Bapak Ibu sekalian, I will now move again to English. Thank you so much, Prof. Damanik, for the presentation. We will now go into the question and answer session. The committee will show the question coming from the audience. We have already so many questions, yeah. So I would like the committee to start showing the first two questions for Dr. Sandra Tempongko. Okay, so there are. I would like to give the first question to Dr. Sandra Tempongko. The question is from Rizal Daniel. Here is the question. The question is, could you please share about the studies which conclude that tobacco or cigarette smoke does have a significant effect on fetal growth and under 5 children? I think this one has been shared by Dr. Wangge about tobacco, the effect of tobacco and cigarette smoking on fetal growth and under 5 children. But if Dr. Sandra have more things to share, please do. And how about the population smoke produced by motorized vehicle? Does it also affect children's growth and development? So, Prof. Sandra, the first question.
Yes, thank you very much. I think the detailed study, especially focusing on Indonesia, as shared by Dr. Wangge, in terms of what is the significant effect. But I think several studies have already been done. The evidence have really showed us that smoking during pregnancy would have a significant effect on the fetal growth. And of course, Dr. Wangge was talking about the under 5 and the stunting. Because children born or babies born of pregnant women who smoke during their pregnancy were really abnormally lower in weight. So there's several studies done. I think there's a lot of studies done. You can just Google some of the studies from WHO, or you can just Google using the keywords low birth weight and pregnancy, smoking during pregnancy. Now, in terms of the pollution smoke produced by motorized vehicles, definitely it would affect because of all the toxins. There are also toxins in that smoke. That's why it's causing pollution. No? It's causing pollution in the environment, which would have definitely a health effect. There's going to be impact on health. But I cannot right now tell you what is the significant effect, how much is the effect on children's growth and development. But what I can tell you is that definitely it affects children's growth and development and health in general, as far as the pollution from the motorized vehicles.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Dr. Sandra. Is that all? I think, I think it's nicely answered the question from Rizal Daniel. Can we now go to the question for Dr. Grace Wangge? Yeah. This is the question for Dr. Grace Wangge. By the way, I forget to mention that Dr. Grace Wangge is actually the alumni of the Southeast Asian Nutrition Leadership Program. Myself is as well the alumni of Southeast Asia Nutrition Leadership Program. So to all Southeast Asia CNLP alumni who watch this webinar, please ask questions using the link given in the YouTube. So this is the question for Dr. Wangge. What are the short and long-term programs to overcome the risk of stunting due to cigarette smoke? The question is from Tri Widiawati, and how to handle it. Please, Dr. Wangge.
Yeah, thank you, Bu Helda. Thank you, Ibu Tri, who are asking these questions. So what are the short and the long-term programs? Actually, I don't think we need a new program. I think we already have the program for tobacco control and also stunting in place. It's just a matter of how we conduct it and how we monitor it. Because it's already been established. What should we do as a tobacco control efforts? There is WHO FCTC that unfortunately Indonesia is the only country in Southeast Asia who hasn't adopted the FCTC. So I think it's one of the efforts that can be done by also regulators in terms of government who's trying to reduce the number of stunting is also applies the effort of tobacco controls measures. Yes, for example, like putting the pictorial health warning, having a smoke-free zone, and also how try to apply tobacco to control tobacco consumption through tax. That's kind of efforts that already been established for tobacco control measure, and it's already been successful in several countries. And since we know it's related to malnutrition issues, applying those efforts will also help combating the malnutrition issues. So I think if we continue doing what already been described as a successful effort of controlling tobacco and also reducing stunting in other countries, because you also see from Prof. Damanik presentation, there are several countries who are actually very much successful in reducing the number of stunting. We are on course of reducing the number of stunting. So it's already on plan. Now it's just a matter of how we monitor it and evaluate, and how to be, how to be consistent with the program. I think I hope that answer Bu three questions.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Wangge. Yes, no need to have new programs, yeah, as long as the one which is needed is strengthening or enhancing what is the already available programs. So can we have the question, the next question for Professor Rizal Damanik, again from Butri. Prof. Rizal, the question is how to raise the awareness of tobacco control in household. That is the question, Prof. Damanik.
Yes, thank you, Ibu Tri. How to raise the awareness? I think through the campaign, or also to the education to people. So like what we have done with the BKKBN, we have a kind of youth group, what we call the Generasi Berencana. Yeah, through this genre organization, we educate about youngsters and what is the negative effect of tobacco or cigarette smoking. So we also have a good collaboration with many schools at the early beginning, from the junior high school up to the university, to promote about the negative effect of tobacco. So I think this is education and also campaign is a very strategic approach to raise the awareness of tobacco control in household level.
Yeah. So Prof. Rizal, in the awareness part, you mentioned that in the household that the spending for tobacco is actually ranked number 3 after rice and foodstuff.
That's right.
Yeah. So what about that types of awareness in the household, not only among women but among also the head of the household? How do you think that will be controlled by the government?
Yeah, I mean, it is what would say then? It is a bit difficult. I mean, because in one side, the producer of cigarette, they have a right to promote about their products. But on the other side, the government also cannot reject the approach to promote about the cigarette smoking. So this is just like kind of Grand Prix maybe in Formula One. So how to influence the people. So in my opinion, yeah, like BKKBN, what BKKBN again, at the village level, at the families level, we also have project what we call the Bina Keluarga Remaja and then Bina Keluarga Lansia or Bina Keluarga Balita. So through these three types of approaches, the first one is to approach the family with the babies. The second is the approach to the family which have youngsters, a youth generation. We provide we create the program about the education. This program is regularly conducted by visiting the family by our field workers, and also again to promote about this the negative effect about the cigarette or tobacco of tobacco.
Okay. Yes, Prof, I agree very much that education and awareness creation is the key for this. And we are in great competition with the tobacco producer. If you mention Grand Prix, they are using maybe Mercedes engine, and I don't know, we are using what engine.
Because this battle has been a long time ago, since long time ago, you know. Although, even though, can you imagine, the government already put a sticker on in every box of smoking. So lung cancer research, blah blah blah, etc., etc. And then the government already take a raise about the tax for the price of the cigarette. But still, you know, this kind of cigarette smoking habit cannot be, you know, reduced. That's why at the beginning of my presentation, Indonesia is one of the biggest market share for tobacco. Can we imagine about the 270 70 million at the moment? And apart from there, is 60% are the productive age, right? So this is a big share market for the cigarette smoking.
Yes, Prof. Okay, thank you so much, Prof. Now that Prof. Damanik mentioned about the increase in tobacco, I would like to invite Dr. Wangge probably to comment on, maybe share 1 minute, 2 minutes about, not yet the question, but related to the increased tax, about your research on your study on the tax. Tax apa, Dr. Wangge? Tax and stunting.
So it's about so basically we have SEAMEO RECFON have been working in the past 2 years with other tobacco controls colleague. We are looking at how the tax, sin tax especially, can be used as one of the measurement to control and to reduce the prevalence of smokers, especially new smokers, young children. And what we did in last year is actually we tried to see beyond that, like what the local government do when they receive this revenue from the sin tax. What do they do? And what we found is in Bogor and Jakarta is actually some of the revenue is actually was mandated by the regulation to be used for promotive and preventive efforts in health. But apparently, the terms promotive and preventive is kind of lean, because what we found is the term promotive and preventive was translated into building of health facilities, advanced health facilities, for example, ICU. Because so instead of making the revenue as a promotive and preventive effort, like for example, education, health promotion on how to stop smoking, with the reason of to help alleviating stunting, some of the revenue was used to build a neonatal ICU, because they said it's to be prepared if there is babies who get disease because of because of smoke exposure. That's what we found. But that's what happened, and it's quite sad that the aim of the revenue is actually should be used for promotive and preventive measurement instead of building facilities.
Okay, so that's interesting, yeah. We have here with us a representative from Asosiasi Pemerintah Daerah Kepulauan dan Pesisir Seluruh Indonesia, or ASPECSINDO. May I invite Ibu Rizky Nurul Ilmi to probably say something on this aspect as part of ASPECSINDO. Is Ibu Rizky here with us? Apparently no. Okay, probably later on, if Ibu Rizky could be reached, we could also ask her to give some words in this aspect related to the role of the local government in this. But could I ask the committee to show question for Dr. Sandra now? Dr. Sandra, question for Dr. Sandra. I think it's in the first two slides. The first two slides. Do we have more questions from Dr. Sandra?
Okay. So the question is, should we start advocating the ban on tobacco planting? No? So that's the issue. That's an economic issue, actually. And we also, in different governments are also getting some advocacy coming from the tobacco industry, because the tobacco industry would advocate for the continuous planting of tobacco so that they will have the ready supply. And there is also this view from the anti-tobacco group, the advocacy group, to move from tobacco planting to other kinds of crops. So this is the debate. There are a lot of views, but one thing is sure is that it is a myth that the economy will suffer if we remove tobacco planting, because we can divert the use of the land to other cash crops as well. I think there's now a lot of efforts into the diversion, but we still need a lot of advocacy, and we still need a lot of influence from policymakers, because the tobacco companies have a very strong advocacy group, and there's very strong support to farmers who are actually planting tobacco. And most of the cases is that they go to low-income countries who would really need some cash, because tobacco is a cash crop, is very and there's a lot of help that the tobacco companies are actually doing. My personal view, we should stop because you're asking for my personal view. My personal view is we should stop, but not to stop also from banning the tobacco planting, but there should be a lot of efforts to help the tobacco farmers on what other crops to plant that would sustain them and would also contribute to sustainable development, help the environment, and help everything. No, but I think there's a big issue on that. It's not yet settled in all the countries that are doing tobacco planting. There's still these two groups fighting, but it has already been proven. There are some studies that has been done to prove that you can transfer and you will not lose as far as economic losses are concerned. You can actually still earn. The farmers can still earn if they move to other products. But it would take a long, it's taking a long time to really reach all the farmers because there's also a strong push and a strong advocacy and information, I call it misinformation, coming from the tobacco companies. They will not stop also. They're doing a lot of countermeasures to the advocacy of the anti-tobacco group. So I think that's definitely there's more negative than positive.
Okay. Yes, Prof. Dr. Sandra. Okay. Thank you for the answer. Can we show now the question for Professor Damanik? Yeah. The question is from Ibu Mary Ramadhani, Prof. Damanik. The question is, what are the strategies, including policies and program, to reduce the number of smokers in Indonesia? That's the first question. Are there any best practices from other countries for strategies and program in addressing tobacco control? That is the question, Prof. Damanik.
So talking about the strategies and policies and program, BKKBN does not exactly relate about the talking about the cigarettes smoking actually. So that first that we have to, that I want to share with you. But BKKBN, as I mentioned earlier, that through the pillars, I would say the pillars, three pillars, development with the family, with the children, development program with the family for the youngsters, and then with the elder women, Bina Keluarga Balita, Bina Keluarga Remaja, dan Bina Keluarga Lansia. So we encourage all the family to avoid using the cigarette smokers. Like the other pillars, genre, what I mentioned before, Generasi Berencana. They have three pillars as well. Say no to drugs is the first pillar. The symbol is like this. Can you see, Helda? This is a zero tolerance for three aspects, like this. Zero tolerance to three aspects. First one is say no to drugs. Drugs here include the tobacco. The second one, say no to having sex before marriage. And the third pillar is say no to marriage before reach 21 years old for female and 25 years old for the male. So this is the three symbol of our generasi, the young generation of Indonesia. Generasi Berencana. Say no to three. Zero tolerance. Right? So
say no to drugs, Prof, and then say no to...
First one, say no to drugs. Drugs, this include narcotics, and also because the using of the narcotics and other drugs is related, it's stimulates by smoking the cigarette actually. So say no to drugs, no narcotics, no nafza, right? So include no smoking.
Yeah. Okay.
The second one, say no to having sex before get married. And the third one, say no to get married before 21 years old for the female, and 25 years old for the male. So as long as I know, right, when we had a international webinar or international meeting, even in the UN meeting, yearly meeting with the UN, there is no other country which have a program like what we have in Indonesia, right? There is no program, right? So I think I very happy to promote about this our Grand J program. Say no to three aspect of things. That's the policies and program of our BKKBN for the young generation.
Okay, thank you, Prof. So say no to drugs, including to tobacco use, because
right.
that is the initial initiation of going to drugs, Prof.
That's right.
So can I invite Dr. Sandra to probably share about best practices from other countries for strategies and program in addressing tobacco control? Prof. Sandra?
It's not really best practices, but I'd like to emphasize that there's a need if somebody are doing policies and programs on anti-smoking campaign, or there's a need to focus on the young ones, because the tobacco companies are focusing on these young ones because they are the ones that will replace those who are dying, the smokers are dying. The tobacco companies cannot afford to lose users. So they're really focusing now on convincing the young ones so that they can be the replacement users. I think there's a need to really focus on this. The tobacco companies are very effective, and they have very good campaign strategies on how to motivate and to lure the young ones into tobacco use. So I think for those who are doing policies and programs, you have to focus also on the young ones, because they are the ones who are starting early, and they are the target groups of the campaign of the tobacco company. You have to counter right away the campaign of the tobacco company. Don't wait until they are already users, but they should be the ones that should be targeted for prevention. Thank you, Helda.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Sandra. Dr. Rizal have to leave now because he has another meeting. Thank you so much, Prof. Rizal, for being with us. May I now ask? Yeah, may I now ask to Dr. Ibu Lucy? Ibu Lucy Dasari from TP2AK. Could you probably say something on the government program in this aspect?
Ini tolong handphone ya Bapak. Handphone.
Ibu Lucy, are you with us? Could you share something on government program related to this aspect? Ibu Lucy is from TP2AK. Okay. Okay. So probably I would like also to invite if Pak Denny from the union, the Bloomberg Union, would like to say something on this aspect of program. Okay, probably no, probably no. So may I have another question to be asked for Dr. Wangge? Probably one more question. We are about to finish. Okay, so this is a study about secondhand smoker of pregnant women. By assessing the nicotine content on cord blood, resulted that birth weight and birth length of the baby are lower in mothers who are exposed to secondhand smoke. When compared between prenatal and postnatal, in which phase is the higher risk of becoming stunted? It is prenatal or postnatal, Dr. Wangge?
Yeah, so I think I read this study. This is actually a study in Cipto if I'm not mistaken. And it shows that it is true. It's there's a biological evidence, right, that there is impact of nicotine exists in the cord blood of this baby, and this baby has actually have a, a shorter length. Yeah. So is it when compared between prenatal and postnatal, which one is become the higher risk? I think if we look at the first 1,000 days period of human life, we cannot really compare which one is important, Bu Helda or Dr. Mary. Both are important. As we can see that the impact of smoking, especially through mothers, maternal smoking, and also parental smoking, is very imminent for the baby when they're still in the womb, right? Still a fetus. But then after they will be being born, a continuous exposure of smoking also have an impact of the growth of the child. And actually, if I think the stunting is actually can still be reversed by the correct nutrition intervention and also a psychosocial stimulation. So although maybe later the stature is not improved, they're still short, but at least their cognitive function is not impaired, and I think that's really important. So I think it's both should be conducted, especially in the first 1,000 day of life, prenatal and postnatal. Both are is an important phase that need uh, to be guard against bad influence, not just smoking but also other infectious disease and etc. I hope that answer, but that's purely my opinion based on what I read. Yeah, it's not really. Maybe it's interesting to, or maybe it's not ethical to compare between prenatal and postnatal.
Yeah, but I think I agree with you that it is mostly for any health situation. It is more on a cumulative effect of some exposure. The effect of an exposure is more on cumulative. So it is from prenatal, postnatal, even under the old age until there will be an accumulation of this risk, which in turns later on will have an effect on health. So I think this is a nice closing for the question and answer session, that the effect of smoker, be it first-hand smoker or second-hand smoker, is really actually accumulative towards the life cycle, from prenatal, postnatal until the adult, until the old age. So it is very important to note again at the end of this webinar that we have been seeing studies presented by all the speakers on the effect of smoking on stunting. And the studies may not be very conclusive in some aspect, but it is very conclusive in other aspect, that we are sure there is a connection between smoking and stunting with many different pathways, from biological pathways through the economic pathways as well. So in this case, policies and program addressing both problems are big problems. Yes, smoking and stunting are big problems. So when we can handle, or we can policy, when government can have an integrated programs to prevent both smoking and stunting, I think it will have a big impact on the health of the population. That will end the question and answer session, and I would like to end the session also with the words from Dr. Sandra, with saying "say no to tobacco," which is also one of the zero tolerance program from the BKKBN, which is say no to drugs, including say no to tobacco for the young generation. I think that will conclude our webinar. So I will give back the screen to Alin. Please, to the MC.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Helda. Thank you very much once again to our moderator and speakers today for the great discussion session. Before I close our event today, I have several announcements for the participants. Don't forget to fill out the evaluation form because we have an electric voucher gift for 10% who will fill out the evaluation form. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of this international webinar. Allow me to thank you, SEAMEO RECFON, for conducting this webinar, and all our honorable resource person, as well as all distinguished participants for your kind attention today. It was my pleasure to be the master ceremony for today's webinar. I apologize for any of my words that less pleasing to all the audience today. Let us all be guided by all the things we have learned and heard throughout today's session. We hope to see you again in the next webinar. I am Maulina Rizky Astari. Thank you very much for your attention and good afternoon. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.